Hey guys, Whitney here. Welcome to the Passive Investing Made Simple show. I'm your host, Whitney Elkins Hutton, Director of Investor Education here at PassiveInvesting.com. And thank you so much for joining me today. We do this show live every Tuesday to help you learn the ins and outs of passive investing so you can go into your next deal with confidence. And so if you haven't done so already, make sure to check us out at PassiveInvestingWithWhitney.com. Now, today we're going to dive into the topic about investing with peace of mind. And really, I want to draw this context on like how to, what's a good way to pass on your wealth. Now, in my book, Money for Tomorrow, I call this the I Love You plan. And so we're going to go through some of the key tactics that I lay out in this phase of investing, which I call passing wealth on, and just so you can actually invest, build your passive real estate portfolio, your empire, and know that it's going to transition fairly smoothly to the next generation. Now, if we haven't met already, again, my name is Whitney Elkins Hutton. I'm the Director of Investor Education here at PassiveInvesting.com. And this is the whole reason why I invest in passive real estate, is so I can spend time with my crazy crew here. This is an older picture of my husband and my child and my puppy, but really it just illustrates the point that everything that we've been building in our real estate portfolio since 2002 is in service of how we can spend more time together as a family. Concentrating on experiences, investing in our personal growth, and giving back to the world. And this is what I love doing here, is spending time with you, the passive investor, helping you learn the ins and outs of passive investing. Now, over the course of almost 23 years of investing in real estate, I've done live-in flipping, house hacking. I've scaled, almost 40 single family rentals. I've had the multifamily building. I've done the GP partnerships on larger passive real estate assets. I've also been an LP as well. But today, what my husband and I hold is about 6,500 multifamily units, 2,200 self-storage units, and 15 express car washes. And we have a myriad of other assets. Now, what I want to impart to you today, and this is not a story that I tell very often here on the Passive Investing Made Simple channel, is that I also have a different experience. We usually talk about my experience of scaling passively, breaking those golden handcuffs, that time freedom. What we rarely talk about is that I've also had the unfortunate experience of selling 3 probates in my family, one living trust, one irrevocable trust, and one revocable trust. Now, most people would think like, hey, if you settled 5 estates, there's probably some serious money here. Actually, the combined, across all 5 of these estates, there's been over $700,000 of losses that can be contributed to just poor planning. Okay, as my family members, scaled their assets, and we'll kind of, challenge whether they actually had assets or not, it triggered over $700,000 in losses. Now, okay, this isn't a pity party here, but I want to draw attention here. If you can hold that money, let's just say, I see these losses in a lot of different investors' portfolios. If you could hold on to that money, in this case, $700,000, and just put it in an investment vehicle that could compound at 7% for the next 30 years, that's $5.3 million in net loss that has occurred to my family's future wealth plan. And that's one thing that I'm super serious, very driven to help investors understand. It's not just about how can you scale your portfolio. We want to make sure that we're keeping as much money in the portfolio as possible so it can work hard for us. But we're also we want to take care in understanding how we can pass this wealth on to the next generation. Now, here's the root problem, is that talking about passing on wealth, usually, we have to talk about dying. Nobody wants to talk about that. That's not the sexy part. Everyone wants to talk about how can we build assets? How can we scale? How can we grow that? And therein lies the root problem. It's because we as investors, our society, our culture doesn't actually put us in a position to actually master the wealth game. Okay, we just are conditioned that the next investment, the next paycheck, the next deal that you close, the next tactic you master is going to solve all your problems. Okay. Now, I actually like kind of pulling this together in say like a board game analogy. Okay. So if wealth were a game, say like Monopoly or Catan, any game, really, if you're going to master the game, you first have to understand what the objective of the game is. Then you have to learn the rules. And then just because you know the objective and rules doesn't mean that you actually know how to play successfully. All right. And so we have to master all three parts of the game in order to actually win the game. Now, when we're talking about generational wealth, really what the objective here is that we're trying to build as much income as we can passively that covers all of our desired living expenses. So essentially we can do what we want, when we want, with whom we want. Now, I like thinking in terms, not just today, but like cathedral thinking terms. What is this portfolio going to look like to my daughter, to my daughter's kids? That's more of like cathedral-like thinking. I can't even envision what this portfolio is going to look like in the next 50, 70, 100 years. Okay. So we want to make sure that we're setting up the next generation to not just take what you've built and consume it, but to be able to build upon what you've created. And that is an integral part of learning how to pass on wealth, especially having good peace of mind about passing on your wealth. Okay. Now, I am not going to go through all the different rules here. We're not going to spend a terrible amount of time, but I want to put them in front of you. Now that we understand the objective of building wealth, we have to understand the 4 rules that you as an investor have to master. You have to learn how to create wealth, essentially in your sleep, keep it. Okay, don't let it erode through misuse of interest or taxes or, paying high fees, stuff like that. We need to be able to grow it in your sleep and then pass it on. And again, remember the sexy things here to talk about. Most investors get really good at creating wealth and growing their wealth, but they don't really flex those muscles at keeping it and learning how to pass it on. Okay, now today is for educational purposes only. We're going to dive into a little bit of legal thought here, but nothing's construed as financial advice, legal advice, or tax advice. So anything you learn here, you need to package it up, take it to your professional, and understand how it applies to your personal situation. And if you're just like your head spinning, you're like, Whitney, you're going really fast here. I want to learn all the other rules. I want to learn the end-to-end blueprint on how to actually master this game. I have it all laid out for you here in my book that I published this year with Bigger Pockets, Money for Tomorrow, How to Build and Protect Generational Wealth. And if you order it off of Bigger Pockets, you get some cool tools, especially the Excel spreadsheet of the I Love You plan. Okay, you can actually download that and start from not even start from scratch. Okay. Now, we talked about that a lot of these lessons were learned the hard way, but there was one situation in my life, especially for this phase, learning how to pass on wealth, that really hit home. And that was when my mom passed away. And I wrote about this on Bigger Pockets. It was originally published in 2018. But just imagine, okay, you get a call one morning that a close loved one of yours has passed away. They've been struggling with health issues. Maybe there's been a little bit of estrangement there. You guys aren't exactly close at that point in time, but you know that you're the executor or executrix of their portfolio. Okay. But you have no idea where anything is. Okay. You don't know how the state's set up or, even where to begin to find the documents. Okay. But what happens is that you're handed a set of keys to a very distressed asset. Okay. Maybe there's been some hoarding, obsolescence, maybe some even in foreclosure. And here's the thing. Not only do you have to deal with the emotions of losing this loved one, now you have to deal with the potential traumas of settling this estate. Now, I took this lesson and essentially packaged everything that I learned across all settling those 5 estates, but most particularly settling my mom's estate. And I packaged this up into a nice, package that you now can take and execute on and avoid putting your loved ones through a similar situation. Okay, so it's a 3-phase plan that we're going to talk about here. Okay, so phase 1, we're going to talk really quickly about how to plan for your incapacity, how to legally communicate the passing of your assets. A lot of people actually know about that, okay, surprisingly enough. But then it's where they start kind of like losing steam, is that, and where a lot of wealth gets eroded, is they don't have a phase 2 complete, which is having safeguards in place to ensure the wealth transfer, or actually having that fully executed I love you plan. And I'm going to touch on that. And then they totally negate phase 3. Okay. They don't train their executor or executrix in order to settle the estate. They don't train their heirs properly to be able to steward what they built. And they don't have an advisory board in place. Okay. Now, phase 1, let's start going through the phases. Phase 1, we want to essentially set up the living will. Okay. And again, I'm not a lawyer here, but you're going to want to take this information back to your legal team and consult with them and be like, hey, I heard this amazing person who went through all these different life experiences, and they say that I should really consider having this as part of my estate planning portfolio. Make sure you've got these holes filled. Okay. Now, planning for your incapacity is not the same as estate planning. Okay. It is actually one of the ways to keep wealth in your family. So I actually, if you're reading the book Money for Tomorrow, I actually talk about this in the keep phase of the book. Okay. But it also applies here. Okay. It can be part of your estate plan, but it is not your estate plan. Okay. But again, the gotcha here, nobody likes to talk about death or dying. Okay. So they don't plan for their incapacity early enough. And this leaves them open to unexpected events that could deplete their wealth. Okay. In order to package up a living will, you're going to essentially talk to your lawyer and have the living will crafted, a healthcare directive crafted, as well as durable powers attorney. Now, all of these documents together will allow someone to make pre-arranged decisions on your behalf, perhaps keeping your health from draining your wealth. All right. Now, another part of planning for your incapacity is possibly considering adding in some sort of life insurance. Now, it could be like a cash flow life insurance policy or a permanent policy, something that you could leverage while you're alive to help, pay some medical bills or something like that, should you be incapacitated. Or at the very least, having some sort of term life insurance plan that can help, fill the gap, for the income that you were bringing in should you pass away. Now, here's the thing. The living will package with its healthcare directives and power of attorney essentially keeps my health from draining my wealth, while the cash flow life insurance policy can actually be a stopgap. In case like I were a really nutty investor and lost a lot of money, I can still pass a chunk of inheritance on to the next generation. All right. Also, part of phase 1 is learning how to, again, protect your assets. Okay, passing those on legally. Now, this is where a lot of people are like, yep, I got it. I got my will in place. I got my trust in place. I know exactly what you're talking about here, Whitney. But here's the thing. You may or may not have the right tool in place. Now, if you're watching this on video, you're seeing a kind of a side-by-side comparison between wills and revocable living trust. And the simplest way it was put to me by a lawyer is that a will is a document, okay, that essentially allows your family to sue your estate. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, your assets will always be owned. Okay, if I have my assets in my name right now, I'm alive, but as soon as I kick the bucket, if I don't have any other instrument, if they're all in my name, it's going to move into the estate of Whitney. Now, essentially, the will doesn't guarantee that my heirs get the assets, okay? They're in the estate, okay? It's simply a document that they can take to court, open up a suit, or known as probate, and challenge my estate to get the assets out, okay? All right. Now, if you don't have a will in place or a living trust in place, there's actually a third option here, meaning that the assets will pass on to the next the next heir according to the state laws. Okay, but the will supersedes the state laws. Okay, so this is you getting to control how your state's allocated. Now, a lot of people just stick with the will because the upfront costs are pretty minimal. They think their estate's not that complicated, so they pay $300 to $600. They're like, I'm going to keep the costs low, but they don't realize that the typical will for, let's say, if you have 1 to 5 million in assets, and most people here that are listening to this are an accredited investor, so you've got over 1 million in assets. The back end settlement for a probate, if you can look this up, is somewhere between $17,000 to $33,000. So you might have saved a couple bucks up front, but your family, your executor or executrix is going to have to probate your assets, take it through a very public process that can be very expensive. Okay. Now, if you have kids, a will doesn't establish guardianship of your kids, but your lawyer can work with you to get documents in place to make sure that if you have kids that they're taken care of as well. Now, a revocable trust is a little bit different. Okay. A revocable trust allows you to, it's a tool to where you can take your assets and transfer it into the trust while you're still alive. Okay. Now, the trust never dies. So when you pass away, essentially the trust documents are going to be executed and the next trustees will be named, the next beneficiaries will be named, or maybe that revocable trust will spin off child trust, little baby trust underneath it. Okay. Now, to set up a revocable living trust, there's going to be some upfront costs. I typically see $3,000 to $6,000 to set it up. They can save you a lot on the back end expense. Okay, most trusts, there's just some simple paperwork that has to be filed. It's a very private process when somebody passes away. So there's typically just some nominal like legal fees, maybe a couple $100 in order to settle it. Or if you're in a state where certain assets do have to be probated, okay, that the probate costs are minimal. The cool thing about a trust is it also establishes guardianship of your children if your children are still minors. Now, the trust is really the only way for you to surefire after you're dead, to surefire like guide the wealth transfer of those assets. Okay, and kind of put some guardrails around how they're used. Now let's move on to phase 2, building your CYA plan. Okay, now this is also what I call the I love you plan. All right, essentially what we're doing here is now that we have all of our legal documents in place, we're going to build upon this. We're going to take all the documents, all the assets. We're going to, anybody that our executor or executrix or heir needs to know about, we're going to put this in a nice, neat document. We're going to essentially take all this chaos and put it into order. Now, when my mom passed away, not only was I handed the keys to a distressed home, my mom never threw away a piece of paper since 1971. Okay, now she was very neat about it. Her filing system was on the floor, but if you can imagine, that created a sea of paperwork through the house. Okay, it would have been nice if I had a nice little treasure map to that sea of paperwork in the house. Okay, so essentially what we're doing here is helping you create, take any chaos and turn it into order. So what do we need to do here? First thing is you can actually go and set up for a lot of your assets paid on death provisions at the bank, meaning you can like log in like to your bank account, and for all of your accounts, it might allow you to say, who's the beneficiary? If something were to happen to you, who would get the account, access to the account paid upon your death, who gets the account? Okay, this is a nice little way to kind of circumvent probate. All right, so make sure, do this tonight, put it on your calendar, get on a secured internet access, log into all your bank accounts and fill out who the beneficiaries are of your account. And oftentimes you can designate secondary beneficiaries. Say you have a spouse and something happens to you both, right? You can name a backup beneficiary. Okay, you can do this for retirement plans. You can do this for insurance policies. Okay, there are a lot of assets that you can go ahead and streamline the process for your executor or executrix and just go ahead and name those beneficiaries. And guess what? You can update those at any point in time. right? Step number 2 to kind of putting together this I love you plan is make sure to create lists. Now there's th 3 lists and then a 4th kind of quasi list we want to create and make sure that these are housed with our trust, housed with our will. Okay. Now, number 1 is what all accounts do you have and who's the beneficiary? Now, here's the thing, you might just put the last 4 digits of the account number, okay? You can just name the bank, right? It doesn't have to be anything that you're giving away, all say routing numbers of full account numbers or anything like that, just enough information so your executor or executrix can go, okay, I need to go to Wells Fargo. I need to look for these 4 accounts and make sure that they've transferred appropriately. Okay. Now, we also want to create a list that outlines all of our assets and who the contact is. Now, guys, if you're here, you're probably a passive investor in a deal. So I want you to list out all of your passive investments. Okay. How are they titled? Okay. Is it in your name? You're jointly with your spouse? Is it in some sort of entity? Okay. And also the contact information for that particular asset. So again, whenever your executor or executrix is going to settle the estate, if your assets are not owned by a trust, okay, they now have contact of all that information and they can maybe update banking information with those operators, okay? Maybe perform assignment of interest if that needs to happen, all right? The third list I want you to create is making sure that you list all of your personal utilities for your personal residence, but also any rentals. Okay, this was a huge, huge issue for me when my mom passed away. In the location that she lived, she could have had 50 choices on who she had her electric and gas with. My husband made 45 phone calls until he figured out which one. Okay, whereas simply, if we had been able to find a statement in the house, and guys, I know you might be giggling to yourself because I just said she had a sea of paperwork. For whatever reason, we did not have the electric paperwork, who that vendor was. But if we simply just had a list of all the utilities and just their contact information, that would have been amazing. Now, if you have a family member who's, maybe in assisted living or, living on their own and, you want to help them ease this transfer, help them create their I love you plan for you. Maybe you're going to be the executor or executrix. See if they will put you as a named contact on their utilities. Okay, that will help as well for you to get access to those accounts when they pass away. It's so much easier to do a lot of these things when somebody is alive than when they've passed away. Now, list number 4 is putting together all the passwords. Like, this is a digital age. We all have our login and usernames for our accounts. Okay. Now, I don't suggest writing these down on a piece of paper. If you do, keep it under a lock and key and very safe. Otherwise, you can use like a password manager software. Okay, and some of these softwares will actually allow you to share passwords with, trusted individuals, like maybe your spouse or your executor or executrix, or they will have a provision to where, like, if you pass away, they can produce a death certificate and get access to certain passwords. Okay. So that's all the lists. And we want to make sure that these lists are nice, neat, that you're updating them regularly and that they're being stored with that will and trust. Okay. Now I'm going to name a couple other lists here that you might want to keep. So they're not here on the slide, but if you have kids, if you have pets, maybe list out like, where they go to school, who their doctor is, who the vet is, like, are they updated on their vaccinations? Are there any special needs that they have? And store that information with the will or trust. And then just once a year, just put a little date on your calendar. Once you get all this in place, just, visit it once a year and make sure that you're updating all this information. Okay. Now, part of phase 3, part of this I love you plan, we also want to start training our executor and executrix. Now, before we can train them, we need to tell them, we need to create a plan though. Okay. We need to be able to tell them what we want. Okay. Why did we organize the will that way? Why did we organize the living trust that way? What were we wanting in passing on these assets? Okay. And why do we want it that way? We want to let them know where all the assets are, okay, and how to access them. Now, we don't have to hand over the keys right now. We can keep that all safe and sound with us. But when we pass away, we want them to know how to get a hold of all this information. Okay. Now, we're going to move into phase 3 here, but I want to tell you a little bit of a story. Okay. And this is a story that I lay out in Money for Tomorrow. This is my grandfather. Okay. He did quite well for himself. Okay. He's the one that started figuring out some of the money puzzle. Now, he had 2 sons, and both of the sons went to school, got married, had kids, had amazing careers. They invested in the stock market. Now, son number 1, my father, had a lot of health issues that almost caused complete bankruptcy of the entire family. Okay. Son number 2 actually started investing in real estate at the age of 60. Now, a lot of you might be going, oh, well, okay, that's cool. You figured some things out and your uncle figured some things out. But here's the thing. There's 2 failures here. My grandfather never taught his sons the fundamentals of wealth building. So even if you're looking at son number 2 and going, high five, he started building wealth. Why did my grandfather not start teaching them from a very young age? And that would have been amazing information for our fathers to pass on to their kids and us not have to figure it out. Now, I've gone on a lot of my own personal journey here. And again, I document it, and I'm going to share some things with you. And that is how to train others on your plan, right? We've got our incapacity plan. We have our actual asset plan, like the will, the trust, how things are going to move right after we pass away. We started to put together all those documents, all those lists that our executrix is going to need to know about in order to settle our estate and make it super smooth for them. And here's the thing. If you can make it as smooth as possible, I guarantee you're going to keep a lot of lawyers out. You're going to pay less in fees to lawyers, to accountants. Just so many headaches will be resolved here. So much time will be saved. Now, these assets have passed, and we need to have a training plan here. Again, we're continuing to take this order or this chaos and turn it into order. So again, number 1, make sure that you train your executor or executrix. Okay. Do it now. You can always update that plan. Maybe once a year, you update your training plan with your executor or executrix. Number 2, write a purpose statement for your will or trust. Remember, we said we were going to tell our executor and executrix as part of our I love you plan why we crafted the things the way we did. Well, let's put that together in a purpose statement for the trust, so they can have simply a tool to pass on to the heirs. Okay. And this is simply, it can be a 1-pager. I mean, it can be 10. It's entirely up to you. But essentially, kind of what are the rules of inheriting a trust? What does it mean? In the case of our family, what does it mean to be a Hutton? Okay. How, if we pass our trust on to our daughter, what do we want her to do with that money? What's the best use of this trust? And why did we set up the things the way we did? All right. Now, if you are going to leave an unequal amount of money to your kids, make sure to write individual letters to them too, helping them understand why you did that. Again, that will help keep, hopefully, your family out of the courtroom. And then number 3, set your family up with a board, okay? With somebody who's a great tax strategist, all right? Pass on that information. Legal strategist, pass on that information, okay? Who is a mentor that could guide them to executing, continuing to build on the trust, all right? Or build on the assets that you pass, all right? Also part of this phase 3, okay? We want to actually be training them the whole entire time, their whole lives. Okay, so I put here some books, games, life experiences, that you can tap into here. I love the book. I mean, obviously, Money for Tomorrow. I wrote it. I actually wrote that book as a primer, as the blueprint for my daughter when she inherits our portfolio. why did we organize the things the way we did? But how did we build it? Because I wanted her to continue to build on what we started. There's another book. This is great for younger kids, Building from Piggy Banks to Profits. We've had Maya Corbrick on the Masterclass before. And then, of course, the old adage, Rich Man in Babylon. There's some games here that you can tap into, Cash Flow for Kids, Monopoly, card building games like Catan, Seven Wonders. Those are going to teach some great resource skills. Thrive Time is actually the cash flow. It becomes, there's cash flow for kids, younger age group. Thrive Time's more for a teen group, and then you get into the regular cash flow games. But nothing beats life experience. Okay, so look to set up a value economy in your household. In our household, we don't pay for chores. We have a value sheet, and so each quote unquote chore that could be performed in the house has a dollar amount attached to it, or money attached to it. Now, here's the thing. I also bring my daughter into my business. Most recently, she built my website for me. I kid you not, she's 12 and she's got amazing skills, but those are awesome skills for her at the age of 12 to bring, entrepreneurial skills for her to develop. Help them invest in stocks, get investing early. Maybe they can invest alongside you in your next real estate deal, but whatever it is, give them opportunity and space to fail and to do it early. You want them learning from $100, $1,000, maybe even $10,000 before they get out in their life and they make some huge mistakes. Okay. And then make sure to document your journey. Okay. Keep a journal. Video, just quick little videos. Even Loom videos can be great to record. All right. Now, the last piece there in training heirs was holding family board meetings. Now, I love this book by Jim Shields and Jamie Shields, The Family Board Meeting. And it's not so much about executing the board meeting. What I took away from the book is that there's 3 buckets of skills you need to concentrate on training your children on, training your heirs, and that is financial intelligence skills, relationship skills, and personal development skills. Okay. They're going to learn about language arts and math and science and history and all that in school. And some of these get woven in, but this is where these are the 3 big skills that entrepreneurs and investors must master. And so this is where you can, use your time in the family board meeting in order to impact their lives. Now, guys, I'm going to open up the floor here to questions, but my challenge to you is if you haven't done this already, if you haven't executed on this phase of your portfolio development, setting up your portfolio to pass on to the next generation, whether you are 25 or 65, I want to know if you're going to be that transitional character in your family, the one that breaks the mold and gets it done now. Okay. Now, I want to kind of point out the reason why most people fail at passing on wealth smoothly without wealth erosion is because they don't understand the objective. They don't understand the wealth building rules. They just want a shortcut, or they do it all really well. They grow this amazing wealth, and then they stumble here in this last phase and don't get their I love you plan fully set up. All right. So essentially what I want to impart to you, what I want to leave you with is when you master the wealth game, you will be unstoppable. So be sure to check out my book, Money for Tomorrow. You can order it here on Bigger Pockets. It's also available on Amazon. If you're here live, don't go anywhere. I invite you to also check out passiveinvestingwithwhitney.com. There, we've got some other amazing tools for you, but you get access to more webinars like this. And if you're here live, don't go anywhere. We're about to start our Ask Me Anything part of the show. All right, guys, welcome back. It's been a few weeks since I've seen you guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. Anyways, if you guys have questions, let's jump on over into the chat box. Chat or Q&A. It's always fun to try to open up the Q&A these days on Zoom. First of all, was this impactful for you? Okay, did this help? one, understanding kind of the whole phase of passing wealth on, but more importantly, that phase two, how to set up that I love you plan. I always want to know, is what I'm sharing impactful for you? All right. Well, I'm going to go with that. We've answered pretty much, well, very impactful. Yay! We got somebody here. Awesome. Awesome. Do you guys have any questions? This is the great time to ask questions. Anything about what we just covered, or we can tap into like anything passive investing. I'd be happy to hang out here for a couple minutes and get those questions answered for you. All right. Well, if we don't have any questions, that's totally fine. We do have our monthly boot camp tomorrow. Oh, I see a couple questions coming in. We do have our monthly boot camp tomorrow. If you haven't registered for that already, it's going to be on end of the year tax moves. So be sure to join with us live for that. Question came in. Do you see your lawyer every time you invest in a new syndication? I don't. But I don't do what I do. Okay. Not necessarily. Okay. So, I would, visit my lawyer or take my PPM to the lawyer for any new operator that I'm working with, or new structure that I haven't already like invested in. I see the amendment to your question, but I think this is really important for people to understand. So if it's a new operator, new kind of like asset class, like any new PPM structure you're not used to working with, because what a lot of syndicators do is that they have their multifamily syndication structure and they just kind of like rinse and repeat. I've actually gotten a hold of PPMs before where the name from of the deal, they missed updating the name throughout the entire PPM, right? Okay, that's not cool, but that's what I'm saying. Most people will use their lawyer will give them a package, and they just boilerplate. That's what I'm trying to say, and they just use it over and over and over again. But anytime you switch operators, deal structures, absolutely is going to be the best $300 to $600, because here the lawyer's job is to find all the different ways why you should not do the deal. Okay, so they're going to redline that thing and they're going to scare the pants off of you. But now you know where all the hiccups are, and you now have all the questions to go back to the general partner and be like, okay, all right, how are you mitigating this? What about that? What about this situation? How are you going to handle this? So that's amazing. The adjustment to the question was, do I go back to my lawyer every time to adjust my living trust? I do an annual meeting with my legal team once a year. Okay. And, especially if because I'm constantly purchasing assets, selling assets, spinning off new entities. Somebody might not need that. Maybe they just need, anytime there's a material change, they need to, meet with their lawyer. If you're an avid investor and you're investing through an LLC, I would, meet with your lawyer, every time you deployed $1 million or $5 million into an LLC. And that's not my recommendation for a dollar amount, but, anything, because maybe you need to spin off a new entity to invest through. Long story short, it's I explained this in Money for Tomorrow. Okay, you're going to have expenses that are destructive expenses, right? Lifestyle expenses. I mean, Dave Ramsey, Susan Orman, they talk about all those things. I think a lot of people understand productive expenses. If you could pay $1 and you get 5 out, that's very productive. I'm going to play that slot machine, all the time. But the protective expenses, let's make sure that we are aligned, that it's actually helping you protect your wealth, keeping money in your pocket. So, I would, really heavily consider, meeting with your lawyer anytime you have a very material change, a birth, a death, divorce, You bought a new house, whatever. I'm sure there's other situations there. But specifically, just kind of keeping them like updated once a year, and they'll look at your structure and they might move a few chess pieces around. It can be now I'm down to where I have all my paperwork lined out. I have it all in a chart. I update it, meet with my lawyer. It's really 20 minutes. So it's not even $300. So it's like $150 for me to meet with my lawyer, and we just get it all done. So it can be pretty smooth. Any attorney recommendation on setting up trust? Well, I've only done my own. So that I love KKOS Legal. Mark Kohler is one of the managing partners there. And they do legal and tax. And so for a limited partner, that can be really attractive. So kind of, having both things, both professionals under one roof. There's a lot of other legal options out there. I mean, I know there's websites out there that will even set up a trust for free, but we're trying to build wealth. Okay. We're not trying to do like a boilerplate trust. So, you can go out there, and, you can also post in other like investor or facing boards and probably get a couple other recommendations. For passive real estate investing, how should I register the investment so it gets passed on to survivors? Can you provide more details on that option? Okay. So, anytime you make a passive investment, it's going to pass on according to what you have set up for your heirship. Okay. So what do I mean by that? I did a webinar on, the 3 different ways to invest in passive real estate. Okay. So essentially your name only, jointly with a spouse, okay, you and your spouse, and then through an entity. Now that entity can be an LLC that you have in your name. It can be an LLC that's or like a self-directed IRA. That's an entity as well. Now, all that said, however you have it held and titled, that's how it's going to pass. Okay. So if it's just titled to you, whatever your will and trust says, that's typically how it's going to pass. Okay. If it's jointly with your spouse, it's going to pass to your spouse. Okay. If it's in an LLC or an entity, however the operating agreement is set up, that's how it will generally pass. Now, the operator also wants to know who's in the deal. Okay. So there are times like if somebody passes away, and so say like I passed away and my asset was supposed to go to, and it was in my personal name, and it was supposed to go to my daughter who's a minor. Okay. She's a minor. She's not an accredited investor. She doesn't have the knowledge on how to run that, in theory, shouldn't have the knowledge on how to run that asset. But remember, she's my kid. And that's what I'm empowering you guys to do. Empower your kids to be able to run your assets today. Okay, long story short, that operator is going to look at 12-year-old and go, no, I don't want to be a partner with them, right? For whatever reason. And so there might be some sort of mechanism to exit an unqualified partner out of the partnership. Okay, now that's going to differ operator to operator. It will be laid out in the PPM and operating agreement that you signed whenever you subscribed. Okay, so hopefully but you don't log into your account and designate a beneficiary like on your investor portal. That's not how it works. It's going to be based on how you invested in the deal and how you titled it. Cool. Great questions. I love it. Any other questions real quick? All right. Well, guys, thank you for joining me today. I'm super passionate about this stuff. So these are all the cool things I like helping. Yes, you're welcome. Somebody said thank you for all you do. This is what I'm super passionate about, is helping, passive investors just understand all the intricacies here. Because I think we tend to make it overcomplicated, and it really isn't. But there is a lot to pay attention to and a lot to learn. I will give you that. Guys, we'll see you tomorrow on our end of year tax planning boot camp. All right, take care, everybody.